Welcome back with a smiley face. A link is provided in the video description for previous episodes. His Rejected Quiet Companion. Episode 1. Blurb. Winter has only ever known love for a short time in her life. When her mother is killed by rogues, her father and brother blame her even though she was only 5 years old at the time. That's when the abuse and the bullying starts. When she's rejected by her mate upon their first meeting, she doesn't even put up a fight, used to being disappointed in life. Her mate failed to sever the mate bond completely though, and when something traumatic happens to Winter, she becomes mute, silent, unable to trust anyone and anything anymore. She runs, eventually finding her second chance mate who is not quite what she's expecting. Will he be able to break down the barriers she has up and show her what love is? In the end, Winter is forced to realize that sometimes you have to trust, not only the people around you, but in yourself as well. Chapter 1. Winter's POV. I stare into his eyes and I don't even bother trying to struggle when I feel his hands wrap around my neck, instead staring up at what I see as a monster, as he tries to strangle the living breath out of me, my blue eyes swimming with unshed tears as he tightens his grip. Another punishment, another day. My father snarls and I say nothing, lying there like a limp rag doll as he finally lets go, breathing heavily and coughing as I roll over and try to breathe some oxygen into my lungs. I felt a sudden sharp pain in my rib cage and closed my eyes, knowing that he's kicked me once again, and struggled to my feet, knowing that he's most likely cracked one of my ribs or even more. It's not the first time and it won't be the last. I can go and get you your drink now, I splutter, my throat now extremely sore, and he backhands me as I taste blood on my lip, a hand to my face as my cheek begins to throb. God, that hurt. Do it, you stupid cow, he mutters, heading over to our threadbare couch and plunking himself down on it, his legs on the coffee table as he settles himself, turning the television on as I limp into the kitchen to fetch him his beer. He takes it without a word and I wait, dreading what he's about to ask of me and knowing that if I don't get it done in time, that I'll face even more severe punishment. You're probably wondering what I've done to deserve this type of treatment from my father, and I can tell you, it's because he blames me for my mother's death. My mother died protecting me against a rogue when I was a small child, and ever since then, I've suffered abuse from my father and even my older brother Damian, who blames me for it. Nothing I say or do makes them stop, and I've since stopped trying. Maybe I do deserve this. My mother would still be alive if it wasn't for me. Listen, you ugly useless girl, my father snaps from his seat, the beer bottle now empty, and he waves his hand at me as though letting me know, even as I flinch from his harsh tone. I'm used to the insults, but for some reason, I can't explain, I still react to them. It still hurts me, deep inside, to have my own father treat me this way. Go and cook me some dinner already and get me another beer, he cries, throwing the bottle at me. I dodge just in time, dismayed when it smashes into the wall and shatters everywhere. Now I have yet another mess to clean up on top of everything else, not that he cares. I'm just a maid to him and my older brother. A servant, if you will. I gave him the beer and headed into the kitchen, perusing the meager contents. Whatever food we have is because I get it before the money runs out from my father's constant drinking. Finally, I settled on chicken and salad, doing my best to make a decent hearty meal out of so few ingredients. I, of course, put just a sliver of food on my plate, anything more and he'll throw it out and tell me I'm too fat to be eating. If he doesn't, then I know that Damian will. He copies my father in an attempt to get his approval and makes my life just as much of a living. Apparently, thank goodness, the dinner I make is acceptable because all I get is a grunt as I hand it over, before dropping to my knees and picking up the shards of glass scattered everywhere. There are so many of them and I cringe as I cut my hand on a small sliver of glass. So far, Damian has yet to come home, something that is not too unusual, and I'm extraordinarily grateful. Because as bad as my father is to me, my older brother is far worse and not only torments me at home but also at school, where there is no escape for me. It's like a game to him. My father never picks on him, in fact, adores his only son. Lucky Damian. The only person he hates is me. I feel a tear well up in the corner of my eye. My life means nothing to me anymore. All my hopes and my dreams? All I can focus on is getting away from this useless pack and studying at a college where no one can find me. Because if I don't do that, then there's every likelihood that at this rate I'm going to end up dead. Why don't I tell the Alpha and Luna, you ask? Because they are friends of my father's and we live on the edge of the territory line, far away from everybody else, so no one ever hears me scream, or whimper. I'm never taken to the hospital, so there's no record of abuse. I want so badly to run away from all of this, but there's nowhere for me to go. I have no other family, no friends, and no hope. Everything has been taken away from me. Once upon a time, my brother adored me, but now he and his friends take pleasure in torturing me, and my life is a complete and utter nightmare because of those who are meant to love me the most. My own family. My name is Winter and I'm 17 years old. This is my story, my life, my pain. Family used to mean everything to me, but now I wish that my father was dead and sometimes even Damian too. I'm so full of hatred that it's all I can do to hide it instead of letting it loose. I will never truly be free until I leave this life, and God help me, I hope it's soon. Chapter 2. Damian POV. It's nighttime and I'm hanging out with my best friends and laughing at their stupid jokes, beer in hand, all of us in the forest and blatantly smoking weed while drinking. Like we give a st if one of the patrols comes across us. It's not like Dad cares what I do. Hey bro, my best mate, Thomas says, tossing me another one. How's your sister going? He teases me and I roll my eyes. Even to me, it's plainly obvious that he's got a bit of a crush on her. Not that I'll let him near her. Yuck. She's not my sister, I snapped back, thoroughly irritated, and you know it. She's the reason my mother is dead and I hate her, I exhaled, taking a sip of my beer while my other friend Dylan chortled. I gotta say, man, she's hot stuff though, he says, and I turn to him threateningly. What do you mean by that? I hiss, and he shut up instantly, recognizing that he'd gone too far. I'm not being protective of my sister, on the contrary, but that doesn't mean they can make remarks about Winter like that either. Stay away from her, I countered, she's nothing but trouble. Just ask my father, I add darkly, the only thing she's good for is housework, I mutter, and they nod, content to sip their beers and say nothing at all, just chill and hang out. It's far more relaxing in any case than going home, that's for sure. Damn it, man, I had better get back before Mother comes looking, Dylan says bitterly with a scowl. She's been on my case since we all got suspended from school, he adds, speaking sarcastically, and I give him a sympathetic look as he ambles off. In my case, my father could care less what happened when it came to my school work, let alone if I bothered to do it, which in itself was a blessing. All he cares about is Winter and what she's done to both of us. How about you, dude? I asked Thomas, wanting him to stay a little longer with me. But he just sighs and puts out his blunt, looking regretfully at me. I guess he even has trouble with his parents. Same, my parents are none too pleased about the suspension either, he says grimly. Dad threatened to kick the st out of me, not that he would, of course, but it makes him feel better about it if it looks like he cares. I grimace. I have met Thomas's parents and they aren't exactly a cakewalk either. What are you going to do tonight? Asked Thomas as I put out my own blunt and took a swig of my beer, effectively finishing it in one gulp. I raise my eyebrows at him and shrug my shoulders, not really fussed about what I'm doing. I finally get to go to school tomorrow after a week away, and I can't think of anything better than seeing poor defenseless little Winter being bullied by my friends and the popular group at school. I wonder if she's still up or if she's gone to bed, if Dad is drunk, just like any other night. I guess I'll go home, I said with a sigh, maybe I'll get lucky and Winter will still be up to tease. I add, laughing to myself just a little at the thought, and, of course, Thomas laughs, clapping me on the back and walking away as I throw the beer bottle on the floor and smash it, walking in the opposite direction. I know I'll have to head home, there's no point staying out here by myself, especially since all of the beer has been drunk and the weed smoked. But I also know what to expect when I get home and I'm not looking forward to it. My dad can be right when he's flat out drunk, which is almost every single night. Sometimes he'll yell insults at me, but the majority of the time he's screaming at Winter. She bears the brunt of it and has been since she was 5 years old and our mother died. Part of me felt sorry for her initially, but now all I can see is my mother's grave in my mind and the feeling passes. I put my hands in my jeans pockets and began to saunter towards the house, taking my sweet time as though I could prolong it for as long as possible. I cringe at the thought of having to carry Dad to his bedroom again. Lately, his drinking has gotten worse and I know, Winter probably as well, that it won't be too long until the old man loses yet another job due to his drinking. It wouldn't be the first time, but he's always worse when that happens. I shudder. Maybe I'll get lucky tonight and he'll have passed out in his room, that would be a blessing in itself. As I walked back towards home, I suddenly came to the realization that none of my schoolwork due the next day had been done and gave a wry smile. It looks like there's something I can make Winter do for me after all. She was smarter than I was and easily got me good grades when I made her do my homework. If she was sleeping, I would just wake her up. After all, it's not like she really has a choice. She'd do as I say or face the consequences. I might not be as forceful as Dad can be, but Winter knows that it's best to obey me and do whatever I give her. I smirked to myself as I opened the door and went in search of my little sister. Oof, she cries out as I throw my backpack at her, and I barely spare her a glance. Do my homework tonight, I snarled and ignored the defeated look on her face. She looks close to tears as I leave, but I harden my heart. Chapter 3. Winter's POV. I force myself to wake up early the next morning, in order to get ready for school. I'm so tired I can barely see straight and it's all I can do to make myself get in the shower and get dressed. Damian came home late last night and insisted on me doing his schoolwork, and when I didn't move fast enough for his liking he punched me in the stomach, not to mention throwing his damn school bag at me. It was an extremely long night, spent doing my homework on top of his as well. God, I hate him. I couldn't help myself, stopping to turn and look into the battered mirror atop my shabby dresser. I'm not surprised by the large dark circles under my eyes or the thinness of my figure. I hate the way I look and I know that I'm ugly. My face is pale, so white rather than porcelain, my eyes a dull blue, and my hair a frizzy blonde that's long and lanky. No matter how much I washed my hair, it never seemed to make a difference. My clothes are ripped, hand-me-downs from OP shops, jeans with holes in the knees, and a sweater twice the size of me that hangs down way past my knees. I didn't really have anything better to wear and I put my threadbare sneakers on with a grimace. The bottom of them are thin from overuse and I know that one day soon I'm going to have to go and look around the thrift shops and find a new pair to use. I have barely got the bacon in the pan sizzling and pancakes going, when my father staggers in, looking pale and exhausted, his eyes red and puffed up as he sits there, impatiently waiting for his food. He looks a mess and I hope he cleans himself up before going to work because, at this rate, he'll lose his job. Not that that seemed to bother him though. Here's your coffee, I said very quietly, placing it beside his elbow and vehemently hoping he would just drink it this time instead of flinging it away. Apparently, he was too tired to do that this time and he drank it down without a qualm or complaint. Damian also staggered in and sat down at the table, glaring at me while he waited, drumming his fingers on the table as I hurried as best I could. Just once, I wish they would get off their lazy backsides and give me a damn hand. It wouldn't exactly kill them to help, would it? Besides, he is old enough to make his own breakfast for heaven's sake. I don't dare tell him that though, I'm not exactly in the mood for another bruise. Here, I tell them softly, placing their large plates in front of them and going back to the bench where my one measly piece of bacon and a slice of toast waits. It's not even enough to touch the sides of my hunger, but I don't dare take any more in case they see me. I stop short when Damian gets up from the table and comes over, eyeing me maliciously. He's up to something, I just know it, and I feel a sense of dread rising inside of me. I try to keep my expression blank so he doesn't see or sense my fear of him. "What do you think you're doing?" he says, and I eye him curiously, my heart already beginning to thump wildly in my chest, anticipating what's about to happen as I hold my breath. "Eating breakfast," I say nervously, and before I can stop him, his hand shoots out and sends the plate flying to the floor as I stare at him and the broken plate in dismay. "What?" "Oops," he says slyly. "Guess you're going without fatty again," he tosses out as he sits and begins to devour his own delicious breakfast. I said nothing. I'm not fat, in fact, I'm anything but, considering I very rarely get to it. But, after all, what would be the point? Damian can do whatever he likes to me, and my father will never once step in and stop him, not when he approves of what my brother does to me. I keep my tears to myself, my stomach growling with hunger. I take a deep shuddering breath and bend down to pick up the pieces of the broken plate. I salivate at the sight of the bacon and toast on the floor, but they are covered in dirt and would be disgusting to eat. I force myself to throw them in the bin. A sharp piece of shard slices my finger and I watch the blood drip down in fascination. It doesn't even hurt, nothing does anymore, and I clean it on my sweater as I pick the shards up, sadly knowing that this was to be my only food until dinner time and that I would be starving hungry again today. Dad and Damian don't care, hurrying out of the dining room when they're finished and leaving me to clean up before I can grab my own school bag and walk to school. Damian's already left in his car, for which I'm extremely grateful, as I don't have to worry about what else he might do to me next, and so has my father, who never even says a word to me, not that I expect him to anymore. This leaves me to take my time, wanting to prolong the experience for as long as possible. The school, which used to be a sanctuary when I was smaller, has now become my own, a place for bullies and my brother to torment and make fun of me, and I know exactly what I'm facing, my whole body trembling in fear as I began to traverse through the corridors and make it to class, with the hopeful thought that maybe today would be different and that I would be left alone for once. It was a futile hope. Chapter 4. Winter's POV. It's lunchtime and I'm sitting outside, my poor stomach growling as it smells the delicious scent of other students eating their lunch, my head hung low and my blonde hair hiding my face as though people wouldn't recognize me. I stood out like a sore thumb. It would take a miracle to get through lunchtime without being accosted by one of my bullies. "Hey loser," I hear and my heart drops. I'd know that voice anywhere, who wouldn't? I looked up tentatively, the other girl eyeing me with a wicked grin. My heart sinks despite telling myself to get a goddamn grip. It's none other than Jessica, the most popular girl in school, her long blonde hair gleaming and shiny in the sunlight, her big blue eyes cold and condemning, her skin a nice golden honey tan, and her figure slim and clad in a cheerleader's outfit. She lives to humiliate me, and all I can do is look up from my position on the grass and wait for what I know is coming. I swallow, my heart thumping loudly in my chest. All I want is to just be left alone, in peace. Is that too much to ask? Why does everyone hate me so much? I've never done anything to them, not that they care about something so mundane as that. They live to make fun of me. Sure enough, she's clutching a can of soda which she dumps unceremoniously over my head as I shriek, my hair now dripping with cola as she laughs maniacally, her cheerleader group behind her, giggling behind their hands. It's cold and sticky and trickles down my clothes as I stand up, letting it drip down my back as I shudder. "It's an improvement," laughed Jessica, gesturing towards me as I stared down at the ground. "Don't you think her hair looks better, girls?" she added with a smirk. There are choruses of "sure does" from behind her, and I hope she's satisfied and that she'll leave now. Instead, she walks right up and swings, her fist connecting to my jaw as I flinch, pain already shooting upwards as I place a hand there, my cheek still sore from the previous day. "You should die, it would be much better for you," Jessica sneered, and I felt tears well up in the corner of my eyes, but I was determined to keep them from falling. I haven't done anything to her, but Jessica's in love with my brother Damian and tortures me so that he'll like her back. Little does she know that he can't stand her, she's so oblivious. Thankfully, they all leave me and the bell goes for the next class. I stand up awkwardly, my hair still dripping and feeling incredibly sticky. It's going to be a nightmare to wash out later, but I also can't afford to miss class. My grades are the only thing I have left and I work hard so that, eventually, when I do graduate, if I make it until then, I'll be able to leave this town and my so-called family and study, far away at a college of my choice. I'm determined to get out of this town, no matter what it takes, and become a lawyer. If I keep my grades up as I have been, I might even be able to organize a scholarship. Lord knows there's no way that my father would even dream of paying for my tuition and, quite frankly, I'll be glad to leave. I won't be telling them where I'm going either. I'm lost in my thoughts as I walk slowly through the hallway, aware of the strange looks I'm receiving and the whispers going on behind my back as my hair clings to my clothes. Thanks, Jessica, I think to myself sourly, it's just what I needed today. To feel disgusting on top of everything else. My hands clench into fists involuntarily every time I picture her smug little face, wanting to punch her lights out and knock the smile right off her face. Not that I would try, I'd be killed within moments by her groupies. Still, part of me wondered if it might actually be worth it. I make it to my locker, just in time for it to be slammed right onto my hand as I'm trying to pull out the books I need. I shriek as it opens again, looking behind me to see that is my brother doubled over laughing as I try to curl my fingers and can't. Great, he's broken them again. It would heal because of my shifter blood, but it would take hours and the entire time I'd be in agony. My fingers were already throbbing painfully and I swore silently to myself, Damian giving me one last threatening look before dispersing to his own class. Clutching my hand in the other, I reluctantly headed to my next class, wishing violently that this day would be over already and dreading going home once it was. I only have 2 more classes to get through and then at least most of today will officially be over. Home is worse than school though, and I can't help it, but I wonder whether or not my life is worth living sometimes. Who would miss me if I was gone? No one, that's who. But then I remind myself that if I did something like that, it would be letting them win and I refuse to let them break me until I reach that point. No matter what, I will not let them get the best of me. All I have to do is try and be patient until I've graduated. How hard can that possibly be? It's not like things can get any worse than they already are. I will get out of here someday. Until then, I just need to be careful and trust no one. Chapter 5. Jonathan's POV. My mother is standing in my doorway, and I roll my eyes and mutter something under my breath. Geez, can't she leave me alone, knowing she can plainly hear me? Good, because right now she's being her usual annoying, overprotective self. Listen, smart ass, she growls and I grin, trying to be my usual charming self. I'm trying to make sure you are all ready to go tomorrow. Have you got your timetable? She asks for the 100th time. I laugh. She's given me multiple copies as though afraid I'm going to get lost or something. Yes, mother, I tease and she gives me a sheepish smile as she fidgets with her hands. I know, she says quietly, I'm overprotective, but ever since your father. It trails in the air and I stiffen, feeling nothing but resentment for the man who supposedly raised me. The man who, without a second thought, abandoned his son and rejected his mate for another woman. I hate him. No, I despise him. Ever since father decided to leave and make a home with someone else, I replied bitterly and she sighed. It's a point of contention between us. I hate the man and will most likely kill him on sight, whereas my mother is more soft-hearted and more likely to forgive the bastard. Can you please just try and make this school work? She pleads and I frown. It's true that this is the 3rd such school I'll be attending, but it's not my fault that I refuse to take crap from no one. As an alpha, it's my right to demand respect even when my mother doesn't quite see it that way. She doesn't truly know what high school is really like and how hard it is to avoid fighting with other shifters. I'll try, I grunt, making no promises, and she gives me a genuine smile. Thanks, she murmurs, coming over and eyeing me critically. I frown. What is she doing now? Is she criticizing my clothes? I look down at myself, satisfied with what I see. I chose my usual leather jacket and plain shirt topped with ripped jeans and sneakers. Unfortunately, I still resemble that bastard father of mine with my black shaggy hair and dark green eyes. I hate looking like him, avoiding the mirror at all costs. It hangs there broken now after I put my fist through it one day in a full-blown rage. You might find your mate, my mother was saying excitedly, and I gave a cynical laugh. A mate is the last thing on earth I want, especially after seeing what my mother went through with my father, who rejected her when I was 5. To me, love doesn't exist, and it's the last thing I want or need in my life. Love is just a fairy tale. The school is a shifter school, so while it could be likely, I feel sorry for any girl that has the misfortune of being my mate. Because I won't be accepting her, no way. I have every intention of rejecting the girl and living my life the way I want to, and it doesn't involve being tied down or having a family. I don't want any more burdens to deal with. My mother looks disappointed. She knows how I feel about mates, but it doesn't stop her from hoping that one day I'll change my mind. I know I won't though. It would take a pretty special girl for me to ever consider it, and from what I've seen from girls at every single high school I've visited, they are all shallow, vain creatures who wouldn't even so much as help someone in need. Too self-centered and constantly worrying about their looks. If I did want a mate, I'd want a kind, caring girl who wasn't so fussed with her looks and was genuinely down to earth. I almost snored at my fanciful thoughts. Not gonna happen, I remind myself. Sorry mother, but any mate of mine is going to be instantly rejected, I drew, watching as her eyes lost their sparkle. I hate hurting her in this way, but she refuses to give up on me. She bites her lip but hesitates to say anything more, heaving a large sigh as she turns towards the doorway. I feel a slight pang of guilt which I wash away. It's not my fault she wants something from me that I'm not willing to give. Life is unfair, if anything, my father has taught me that. You know, she said softly, stopping for a moment and looking over her shoulder, her big brown eyes full of what looked like sadness, or maybe it was pity. Either way, I don't like it one bit. Having a mate is the best thing that can happen to any shifter. I wish you could see that, she whispers. Not every shifter is like your father or every relationship doomed to fail. Your mate will love you, Jonathan, keep that in mind, will you? And she leaves as I stare at the back of her with a scowl on my face. She just doesn't understand me at all. There is nothing on this god-green earth that will ever change my mind when it comes to having a mate, or rather the lack of one. I decide to go and do some training and work some of my anger out of my system before school tomorrow. An alpha needs to stay in shape after all. Besides, maybe it will help me calm down and become more focused. School should be interesting tomorrow, I thought to myself with a big smirk on my face. The school wouldn't know what hit them when I got there tomorrow and took over. I'm the alpha and no one would dare disobey my commands, not if they wanted to keep their heads attached to their bodies at any rate. Chapter 6. Winter's POV. I don't know how much more of everything I can possibly take. Every day it's the same old story, the same boring routine, and the bruises that never seem to fully heal before they are taken over by new ones, either from my brother or my father, let alone the kids at school. I'm currently in the shower frantically trying to wash my hair due to the soda it took earlier during the day. It's so sticky and horrible, even smells slightly, and I wrinkle my nose in disgust. At this rate, it might take another shower later to get it fully out of my hair. Or I'll have to cut it, something I flat out refuse to do no matter how long it takes to get this bloody stuff out. Finally, I've done what I can to get rid of the sticky residue and I step out, stopping short as I see none other than my brother Damian sitting on my bed, looking amused at my terror. There's a broad smile on his face and I am instantly tense when I see it. He holds up a book and I feel my heart sink. I've got so much homework already and he was going to add to it. I silently breathe and count to 10. Please don't hit me, I thought to myself, I'm still hurting from earlier today. Maybe he'd leave me alone? Maybe there was something else he wanted, but I very much doubt it. Calm down, Damian says, sounding impatient even as I flinch, waiting for the inevitable slap or punch that was usually forthcoming. To my surprise, it didn't come. I start to relax even though I know that it's possible he'll still hit me. I just want to give you my homework, he says and tosses the book. I catch it awkwardly and he eyes my hand, the fingers having been bent back to straight but so painful it is all I can do not cry out in pain. He saw it and his eyes narrowed for a moment. For a moment, there was silence and I saw something flash in my brother's eyes. I blinked, astonished. Had I just seen concern in his gaze for a moment or was I hallucinating? Since when does he show even an ounce of concern when it comes to me? It's enough to shock me. He bites his lip as he gets up and ambles toward the doorway. I stand still, expecting him to just leave, or hit me, but again he catches me by surprise. Word of warning, he mutters under his breath, my ears straining as I heard his words. Father's downstairs and drinking again, he breathes, almost as though he's trying to warn me, and I feel my heart skip a beat. Great, that's the last thing I need to deal with today, even though I'm used to it now. Then, just like that, he's gone. I'm astonished by his concern, but it's fleeting as I feel dread rise in my gut. There would only be one reason father is home this early, and it's because he's either left work early or because, once again, he's lost his job. I suspected the latter. I want to scream in frustration, bang my hands against the door and just give vent to the feelings I hide inside, but instead, I just bite my lips, so hard that I can taste blood before I venture downstairs to make dinner. I try to be as quiet as I can so that I don't draw any attention to myself. If I'm lucky, he might even be completely passed out. I actually pray that he is as I make my way toward the kitchen. When Damian said father had been drinking, he hadn't been kidding. Halfway down the stairs and I could smell the putrid scent of alcohol combined with his sweaty, disgusting body odor from never showering. It's actually a miracle that it's taken this long for him to lose whatever job he was currently doing. His hygiene is disgusting. The smell is disgusting and I shudder and try to tiptoe down the steps. In times like these, when he drank worse than normal, it was best to be as quiet as possible, invisible if you can manage it. But he heard me and turned from the couch. I watched him get to his feet, staggering, a beer bottle in his hand, his eyes beady and puffy, red from his alcoholism, the scent of his unwashed body drifting over me. He has a small twisted smile on his face as he gets close, his breath stinking to high heaven as I try not to gag. I wait, feeling sick to my stomach, and instinctively back away slightly, knowing that whatever is about to happen isn't going to be anything good. He's staring too hard at me to hope it's just my imagination. Then again, when was it anything nice, I thought to myself sourly. I considered making a run for the door, but that would only delay the inevitable and I would have to go home eventually, face the music, and by then Damian would most likely join in my punishment. I brace myself and hope that whatever is coming will be over quickly and I can get to cooking dinner, my stomach growling loudly in hunger. Maybe he'll just throw insults at me if he's too drunk to hit me accurately. Well, if it isn't the little murderer, he says in a slurred voice, and I flinch instinctively while he gives a derisive laugh. He's clearly drunk, so many beer bottles scattered around the floor that even I'm astonished. It's a lot more than his usual amount. How long has he been drinking while I've been upstairs? I said nothing, knowing that it was best not to provoke him any further. That will just make him even angrier than he already is. He waves the beer bottle threateningly in my face and I hesitantly take a step back. It was still half full of liquid and heavy in his hand, not that he appeared to notice, too busy studying me with pure hatred in his eyes. I'm not a murderer. I chant silently to myself, but it's so quiet, almost as if I'm starting to believe I am. I've been told it so many times. I'm so used to his hatred and contempt that I don't even react to it. Then he swings his hand high up in the air and I try to move, try to run, but he grabs me by the hair and pulls until I stand still, my eyes closed, tears dripping down my cheeks. I feel nothing but a sharp pain in the top of my head before everything turns to darkness and I no longer know if I'm dead or alive. Right now, being dead would be considered a blessing. Chapter 7. Damian POV. I don't know what's come over me lately, but I'm no longer enjoying the cruelty I usually show to my younger sister Winter. There's just something about the way that she stares at me, so much pain in her gaze, that I feel a flash of guilt. If our mother was still alive, then Winter would still be happy and a go-lucky child or teenager, but instead she'd grown up in a house full of abuse. I never used to mind, but lately, it has been weighing heavily on my conscience. My mother would be upset to see the way that my father and I treat her. She loved Winter so much. Died protecting her little girl. I sigh. I guess that's why I warned her about our father being on the warpath. Normally I wouldn't, but today I felt like I needed to. The drunken old man had gotten himself fired again, but I guess that's what happens when you constantly turn up to work either drunk or severely hungover. I've lost count of how many jobs he's been fired from. It's quite pathetic really. I know that he misses Mum, but surely he needs to move on at some stage? The last time I suggested that, though, he turned on me and I'm not planning on trying to get him to move on anytime soon. Something seems wrong, my stomach churning and nausea coming to the surface and, for whatever reason, I can't get rid of a niggling feeling in my gut, turning to my friends and blowing them off as they protest. Whatever this feeling is, I sense I need to go home. They can deal without me for one night, for heaven's sake. It's not like they don't see me at school every day. Well, at least on the days I bother to go. I rush back to the house but don't run. The entire time, I try to convince myself that everything is fine and that I'm just overreacting. After all, my gut could be wrong, couldn't it? I didn't even like facing my father when he was on a complete bender. The house is quiet, too quiet as I let myself in, my father snoring wildly in the recliner, a beer bottle loosely clutched in his hand. Where was Winter? Dread rises up inside of me. Normally, she would already be in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner, but I couldn't see her from my position. Nor could I sense her anywhere, but I could smell the disgusting metallic scent of blood in the air and my heart sank. I know instinctively that it's Winter's because father is not bleeding from any wounds that I can see. I went round the corner and stopped, absolutely horrified, all the blood draining out of my face. I can't believe my eyes and I force the bile down that tries to rise in my throat. Winter is lying there on the cold hard ground and she looks like a rag doll, both of her eyes closed, completely unconscious. There is red blood pooling around her head and I can see its change of color, some of it old. How long had she been lying there like that? God, what had father done? This was the first time I'd seen her in such a bad state. Something occurred to me and I bent down and wrinkled my nose at the smell of her blood, relieved to see her chest rising and falling. She was breathing at least and had a pulse even if it seemed a little weaker than normal. I feel a small sprinkle of relief. What have you done, old man? I said grimly, bending to pick her up, feeling her head draped against me, and, for some inexplicable reason, I found myself feeling protective of her. I shake the feeling off. I can't afford to be merciful towards her, no matter how much I was softening. She was the reason for our mother being dead and that, I couldn't forgive, no matter how much she begged me to. But was she, I thought? What if she was telling the truth? I had no reason to doubt her story, even though my father was certain that Winter had somehow caused our mother's death. But Winter had only been a child at the time, hardly capable of what our father said she was, and I shook my head, trying hard to clear the dozens of thoughts now flooding my mind. I took her to her room. I can see part of her wound is healing and know that though it will be slow, by tomorrow she'll be fine as though it had never happened. I doubt she will ever forget the memory though, and I feel a tiny bit of grief at that thought. Another unhappy memory to hold onto, the poor thing has very few happy ones. I lay her in her bed and gingerly placed her blanket over the top of her, pausing for a moment as I pondered what to do. Was it safe to leave her in that kind of condition? Would father stay away or did I need to lock the door? I sigh. Father's too drunk to do anything more to Winter and I doubt he was capable, anyway, in his condition. Poor Winter's body had seen worse than this and she'd survived. Something I wasn't exactly proud of. Besides, I couldn't risk being seen in her room helping her. Father would take all of his anger out on me if I did. She can sleep it off, I tell myself, backing away from the door and refusing to look at her face. How innocent my little sister looked when she slept. How vulnerable she suddenly seemed. She'll be fine, she always is. Always will be. The last thing she needs is the brother who torments her to stay in her room. I leave without a backward glance, going to my own room. I guess I'll have to do my own homework tonight, I think a tad bit absently, my mind still on Winter's injuries and how broken she seemed. Chapter 8. Winter POV. God, my head is pounding like you wouldn't believe. I force myself to open my eyes, my throat feeling sore and completely dry as I lick my chapped lips, confused and disorientated. Where was I wondered, looking around the room, realizing it was mine. But how had I gotten here? I distinctly remember being hit on the head by my father downstairs and then nothing. I was certain I had fallen unconscious from the pain in my head. So who had put me to bed? I doubted it was father, but it was equally astonishing to think my brother Damian would show that much care for me. But he was the only one who could have possibly done it and I feel a small bit of gratefulness towards him. I force myself to roll out of bed, blinking against the bright sunlight and trying not to scream at the pain in my head. I feel the back of my hair and can tell it's matted with dried blood and I groan, it's going to take forever to get it all out and I'm hoping I won't have to do something horrible like cut it. It's taken forever for me to grow it as long as this. I hurry to the bathroom and am ecstatic to find I'm able to wash it out with a bit of elbow grease, my hand now fully healed along with my head injury. It's the small things in life I think to myself sourly, to be grateful for. I take my time and tiptoe downstairs, disgusted by the mess that greets me. There are dishes piled everywhere and dozens of empty beer bottles scattered all over the lounge room floor. Thankfully, father is snoring loudly in the chair, possibly still drunk judging by the smell of him, and I take the opportunity to make breakfast, putting his on the table. There's no way I'm going to wake him up and face his wrath when I have school to get to. For the first time, I almost inhaled my bacon and egg sandwich, no sign of my brother anywhere and I assume he's gone to school already. Good riddance, I couldn't have been happier this morning. I leave his breakfast out in case and grab my school bag. So far it's been a non-eventful morning and part of me feels hopeful that it will continue, walking to school uninterrupted by anyone for the first time in months, and I can't believe my good fortune. What was going on? Had the moon goddess taken pity on me? A group of cheerleaders is gathered in the hall and I instinctively duck my head down and try to cover it with my long hair as I inch past them all. I could hear their conversation clearly and to my shock no one noticed me as I went past. Too busy with their conversation or possibly gossip. Whatever, as long as it has nothing to do with me, I could care less. Can you believe there's a new kid at school today? That's not all, guess what? I heard he's an alpha, Jessica speaks up and I flinch, still working on getting past them without being caught. I catch her tossing her hair over her shoulder, a massive smile on her face. I just know that he's going to be my mate, it's obvious, she almost purrs while her friends look a bit put out. Trouble in paradise, I think to myself smugly. Looks like her friends also want a piece of this poor alpha kid. What if you're not though? Another one dares to question her and falls silent at the scorching look on her face. He'll still want me, she said smugly, after all, I'm the most beautiful girl in the school. We don't always have to agree to be with mates, we can choose to mark each other. I almost scoff at her blatant display of confidence. Mates are meant to be together forever and I wonder why she thinks just being beautiful will be enough to get his interest. Were male werewolves really that shallow? Well, she could have him. I doubt with the way I look that I'll even get a glance from him, and that's perfectly fine with me. I prefer to be invisible rather than have attention on me. The other girls begin to chat excitedly amongst themselves, and I make it to my locker without incident, grabbing the books I need. My heart sinks a little. With what happened last night, I wasn't able to complete my homework and I feared what the teacher might say. It wasn't exactly my fault, but it still hurt nonetheless. I hated letting my teachers down. Unless it was beyond my control, like last night when I was unconscious, I passed it in every day without fail, and I knew my grades could take a hit, and it was all because of what my father had done to me last night. Damn him, I thought bitterly as I began to make my way to my algebra class, feeling angry and full of hatred at the man who was no longer a real father to me. Hopefully, the homework, or rather lack of it, won't affect my grades in any way. If I have to, I'll offer to do extra credit to make it up. I refuse to let my grades fail when I need them for college. I find myself wondering about this so-called new boy that has everyone so excited. Like we haven't seen an alpha before. Then again, there were no other alphas at this school. Most tend to go to private ones over public, I guess because of their status as leaders of their packs. Would this alpha be kind, or would he be like the rest of the school and torment me along with them? Or would he keep away from me? Because being bullied by regular shifters is bad, I don't really want to find out how much worse the bullying can get when an alpha decides to join in as well. Chapter 9. Jonathan POV. God, I've been at school for not even 2 minutes and everybody is sucking up to the big bad alpha. Do they not realize how embarrassing that is? All I want is to be left alone. Not gushed over. Girls are flocking in from everywhere and it's all I can do not to get crushed by the crowd, or suffocated. God, I'm annoyed. This happens at every school and I'm so sick of it. I start to glower at everyone but no one seems to get the hint. I sigh. At this rate, I'm going to have to use my alpha tone on everyone if it doesn't stop. One girl, in particular, approaches me and I look at her bored. Clearly, she's oblivious to my feelings and even the scowl I direct her way. She looks like all the other Barbie doll cheerleaders, with long blonde hair and big blue eyes that she's batting at me so hard it's almost comical. Hi, there, she says, touching my arm as I try not to flinch, knowing it would offend her, part of me not caring if it did. If it wasn't for my mother, I would be a lot ruder. I fight the urge to walk away. Hello, I said tightly, wanting nothing more than to shove past her. Clearly, she thinks I'm playing hard to get because she invades my personal space even more. I try not to gag at her heavy perfume. Does she bathe in it for heaven's sake? It was pungent. I'm Jessica, she breathed, tossing her head, and I fought the urge to laugh. Did she not realize her efforts were wasted on me? That I'm anything but impressed by her? I can see right through her. Jonathan, I growl and go to move when she grabs my arm. She actually grabs my arm as though we are friends. I can't believe her audacity. To dare put her hands on an alpha. She has a death wish. Please remove your arm, I say gruffly, and her eyes widen in disbelief as she drops it, a confused look in her eyes. Clearly, she wasn't expecting such a reaction. Good. It would take her down a peg or two. I have to get to class, I tell her snidely, and watch as her mouth gapes open and she splutters at me, speechless, her whole body suddenly stilling. Are you gay? She asks me suddenly and I stiffen, unable to believe she just asked me that in a hallway full of students. I have nothing against gay people but didn't appreciate being loudly asked about my ex in a hallway full of curious students. That was going a step too far. In fact, daring to so much as question me was a step too far. I pick her up and slam her head against the locker as she wiggles in my grasp. I could care less that she's a female or weaker than me. What she had done was disrespectful and she would know it. I smiled into her terrified eyes. Finally, she realized her mistake, a little too late. For the record, I growl as she claws at my hands which refuse to let go. I'm just not interested in you, I spit out and let her fall to the ground, her face now an interesting crimson red color as her hand goes to her throat, gasping wildly for air as her cheerleader lackeys gather around her, gossiping and glaring daggers at me for daring to injure one of their own. I glare right back and they look away, their noses in the air, and hastily leave, the Jessica women surrounded by them all. I scoff. Pathetic girls. Too shallow and vain for their own good. The rest of the students are busy getting their stuff out of their lockers as the bell rings for the next class. I go to walk away from everyone, when I'm stopped in my tracks, the most mesmerizing scent drifting towards me of apples and cinnamon, so strong that all my feet can do is walk towards it. So strong and yet so sweet. My mouth drools. It smells like the world's best apple pie, my favorite dessert. What is this scent and why was I drawn to it? The answer came to me and I still, my feet refusing to move. I'm completely horrified. This smell could only be the smell of my mate and I felt my hands shaking. I feel sick in my stomach, a pain in my chest. I had been hoping that she wouldn't be here, that I would never really have to go through with a rejection. Why this school of all places? Why now, I groan. My wolf was going crazy in my head, refusing to ever speak to me again if I went through with it, sending me threats and all sorts of insults my way as I ignored him. I close my eyes feeling forlorn, the scent slowly fading away. Did I try to follow it, or avoid it in the hopes of sparing my mate's feelings? I could wait until later, but part of me desperately wants to get it over and done with before the mate bond becomes even stronger than it already is. Either way, she would be hurt though. It can't be avoided. Perhaps it was best to get it over and done with, I thought to myself, and let her come to terms with it. I didn't believe that my mate would ever forgive me for this though, and I didn't blame her as my feet reluctantly walked towards the scent, drawing me to her, as I began to sniff and find the source of the smell and the person it belonged to. I'm sorry, I think to myself, but I just can't have a mate. I'll only fail them as my father failed my mother, and to have someone special like that only makes you vulnerable. I refuse to let myself become that and have someone rely on me. I don't even know if I'm capable of loving another person, not now or in the future. It was time to sever the bond before I talked myself out of it. Chapter 10. Jonathan POV. I follow the scent to a nearby classroom and, without warning, I open the door and let it slam open, my eyes scanning each and every face while the teacher glares at me. I glare right back and they blink but say nothing. Even teachers cannot mess with an alpha. I smirk at them while my eyes scan the room for the person I'm looking for. It took me a minute and then I spotted her. My eyes fell on a girl sitting there and looking away from me. She's the only one who is, and I study her for a moment. Her hair is blonde and long, but it's her fragile appearance that tugs at my heart. She's so pale, so thin. Does she ever eat? I think to myself sardonically before catching myself. Why do I even care? She had dark circles under her eyes as though she never sleeps, and her clothing is easily too big for her, hiding her thin frame, but not from me. I'm beginning to lose focus as I stare at her, the class speaking in hushed whispers that I ignore, debating how to get her to follow me out of the classroom. In the end, I decided on a blunt approach, desperate to get this over and done with and move on with my life. You, I finally say, pointing to her, and she stiffens, turning her face to look at me, blood draining out of her face, or so it looks like. She's gone so pale that I wonder if she's about to faint or pass out. I hope not. That's the last thing I want to have to deal with. Come with me, I order using my alpha tone, and she's forced to obey, the teacher scowling in the background from the interruption. I don't care. I want to take care of this now before it becomes a problem. I harden my heart, which starts to hurt. My wolf is hating me right now, and I'm forced to put up a block in order to stop listening to his threats and complaints. The girl follows me out hesitantly and we step into the corridor. I ran a hand through my shaggy hair and looked at her, feeling a slight pang of guilt for what I was about to do, but I was really not sure what else to do. She deserves a better mate than me, one who will genuinely be able to care for and love her. I'm not that person. I don't even think I'm capable of loving another person, except for my mother, but she's the exception. What's your name? I ask, and she bites her lip before looking at me hopelessly. It's adorable. I felt my breath hitch. Everything about her is beautiful, from her golden hair to the tips of her toes. My wolf growls at me in the background, hating my guts. I don't tell him that I already hate myself for doing this to an innocent girl. I keep the block up, even though it pains me that I'm hurting my wolf by doing this. It's Winter, she said very quietly, and my heart skipped a beat. Winter is such a beautiful name, and it seems to suit her really well. Unique, just like she was. I gave her a tight smile, feeling incredibly guilty for what I was doing. Listen, Winter, I began to mutter. This is nothing against you, I added, rambling on a bit while she looked at me as though I'm a crazy person, but I refused to have a mate, and, unfortunately, that happened to be you. I waited for some sort of reaction to come from her, but there was none forthcoming. It's almost like she's off in her own little world. I exhale, but the girl merely shrugs as though it's no big deal. Does she not understand what I'm telling her? Does she not care? It stings a little. My wolf is completely miserable and refusing to speak to me. If it wasn't for the block, he would be taking over my body right now in an attempt to stop me. Can you reject me already so I can get back to class? She mutters. I still have homework to hand in. Well, that sucked. I don't know why, but I guess I was hoping she would put up some sort of fight and refuse to be rejected. This was going to be painful, not just for me but for her as well. I'm taken aback but can hardly complain if that's what I intended to do. I took a deep breath and stared into her gorgeous eyes. Jonathan of the Blue Moon Pack, reject you, Winter of the Silver Crescent, she supplied. Reject you, Winter of the Silver Crescent Pack. I finished grimly and waited as she took a deep breath before doing the same. I, Winter of the Silver Crescent Pack, accept Jonathan of the Blue Moon's Pack's rejection, she said dully, and I blinked, surprised by her lack of reaction. Without another word, she leaves, not even glancing back at me, and I stare at the back of her with remorse. Had I hurt her feelings? It was impossible to tell. She seemed so detached somehow. As if she wasn't even there. She'd said it so listlessly, as well as though she hadn't expected anything less from her mate, and I felt incredibly sad for the girl I hadn't even met properly before rejecting her so quickly. I felt a slight sting as the mate bond was severed, but nothing more, wondering if Winter even felt the pain. From all accounts, I was expecting it to be a lot more painful. That's how everyone I'd asked made it sound. I don't even know if she was in any pain from the reaction, and considering that it was clear she didn't yet have her wolf, which meant she was younger than me. But she couldn't be too much younger. She had looked so defeated as well, something that was a shock to see in someone as young as her. I sigh. At least it hadn't been awkward and she hadn't even put up a fight. Maybe Winter had wanted the same thing. For all I know, she might not have wanted a mate as well and had been happy to accept my rejection. Maybe I had even done her a favor by rejecting her first. That was a good thing, right? Then why do I feel so awful? Why can't I stop picturing her in my mind? I head to my next class fervently hoping that it's not one with Winter in it. That would be even more awkward. But then I remember she's younger than me and inwardly rejoice, knowing I won't have to look at her in any of my classes. I drop the block and my wolf steadfastly refuses to speak to me, sulking in the background. I shrug. He'll get over it eventually and realize I did the right thing. To love is to get hurt. He should remember that. Chapter 11. Winter POV. I'm sitting in class, listening to the teacher, who I'll admit was rambling a bit when the door to the classroom crashed open. I don't even have to turn to know it's the new alpha everyone's been talking about. The teacher thankfully falls silent and everyone begins to talk while I wonder what it is he wants. He smells nice, I think drowsily, like sandalwood and bergamot, and I inhale deeply, my eyes suddenly narrowing as I work out why that is. There's only one reason another person would smell this good to me, and that's if they are my mate. Sure enough, he points at me. You, he says gruffly, and I try not to flinch at the authority oozing from his voice. Come with me. He strides back out and I'm forced to follow, the class erupting into giggles as I leave. Great. More fodder for the gossip mill. I can't help but stare at him in awe. His face is just so handsome, his green eyes round and dark, his black hair shaggy and down to his shoulders. He's wearing a leather jacket that makes him look tough, as well as accentuates his muscled body. I swallow, feeling incredibly nervous all of a sudden as he turns to speak to me. I'm not naive. I knew he'd brought me out here to reject me. After all, what guy would want a girl as broken and tainted as I was? I wasn't the greatest looking, and compared to him I must have looked awful. But I squared my shoulders, refusing to let him see how this was affecting me. I needed to get this over and done with, if only so I could get back to class and pretend this never happened. I'd dreamed of finding a mate since I was a little girl, and as I'd gotten older, I'd hoped that mine would come along and save me. I should have known better. Listen, can we hurry this up? I muttered. I need to get back to class. He looked stunned, almost as though he wasn't expecting me to say something like that, but I meant every word. The sooner the mate bond is severed, the sooner the pain will be gone. For a moment, I'm grateful that I don't have a wolf yet, which means the pain will be far less than if I did have one. He takes a deep breath and I wait for the inevitable words. I, Jonathan of the Blue Moon Pack, reject you, Winter of the Silver Crescent, I supply, and he nods and continues, almost forcing the words out. Reject you, Winter of the Silver Crescent Pack, he finishes. I try not to howl at the sharp pain in my heart. I refuse to let him see the pain he's caused me. I, Winter of the Silver Crescent Pack, accept Jonathan's of the Blue Moon's Pack rejection, I say dully, and feel like I'm being ripped in two, trying to keep my breathing even, as I go through the most excruciating pain I've ever felt in my life. I force bile down my throat. For a moment, he looks stunned, and I know he's feeling the mate bond sever completely. As an alpha, he won't feel it as much, not with the strength and power he possesses. I gave him a tight smile and left without a backward glance, fighting hard to keep my tears at bay when part of me wanted to scream out my anguish and let my tears flow. Crying wouldn't do me any good. It never did. My feet felt heavy and rooted to the floor as I went back to the classroom, feeling nothing but dread as I slowly turned the handle with a trembling hand. I forced myself to walk back into the room, casually, as though nothing had ever happened. The teacher looks at me and says nothing as I quietly take a seat, and for a moment I think that everything is going to be well. I was fresh out of luck. Looks like somebody got rejected, Jessica drawled from the back corner, and I stiffened, accidentally giving away that, in fact, had happened. I can feel her malice and hatred from here. Just leave me alone, I whispered, and she gave a loud snort of laughter. I hope the teacher will step in, but they merely look away and I feel deflated. Even the teachers don't care what happens to me. Did he hurt your feelings? Jessica mocked, and I remained silent, breathing deeply in and out as I channeled my anger, trying to keep myself from exploding. Why was it so hard for them to leave me alone? I was hurting right now and Jessica was taking delight in it. Winter got rejected, another student shouts, and I groan and put a hand over my eyes as students begin to laugh at my misfortune. I should have gone home or pretended to be sick and gone to the nurse's station. Well, who would want her? Look at her. She's ugly, of course, he rejected her. She's pathetic, look at her. No way an alpha would want to be anywhere near her. The whispers continued back and forth, and I put my head on the desk and stared unseeing at everyone, violently wishing for the bell to ring and signal the end of the day. At this rate, I don't even care that going home will be just as painful, I'm that depressed from everything that's happened. The bell finally rang and I could almost jump for joy. Finally, I can get away from this dreadful place and the taunts happening. Except that Jessica and her groupies don't leave, as the rest of the class does. I look up into her smirking face and gulp as she looks over at her friends. You know what to do, she tells them, and I get up, and try to run, only to get pushed to the ground, all of them kicking me over and over as I scream, feeling my ribs crack, my chest becoming tight as I struggle to breathe. I place my hands over my head protectively and wait for what seems like a decade until it's over. Stay away from Jonathan, Jessica whispers from the doorway as she and the others leave. I stay curled up in a fetal position and try to breathe. The pain is horrendous and I know that I'll be lucky to get up on my own, let alone make it home. I uncurl myself slowly and sob as I get on my hands and knees, the room spinning around me. I barely make it to a standing position before I feel myself becoming lightheaded. The last thing I hear, before I fall back to the floor and darkness surrounds me, is his voice yelling at the top of his lungs, "Get a doctor here now." Chapter 12. Jonathan's POV. I head back to my next class, listening to my wolf's growls and protests, pushing them aside. But something doesn't feel right to me. Why did she look so defeated back there, as though she'd been expecting to be rejected? Mates generally stayed together and I felt a pang as I remembered the sad look in her eyes. She'd looked so broken and I had helped make her that way. The class seemed to take forever and, to be honest, I had no clue what subject I was currently in, let alone did I care. All I could think about was her and the niggling feeling in my gut. Something was wrong, I could feel it and my wolf could sense it. The bell couldn't ring fast enough for me and, to my dismay, I was held back by the teacher, who had a serious look on his face. "Jonathan, I understand you're the alpha, but that doesn't mean not paying attention in class," he said gravely, and I glowered at him, causing him to take a step back. My eyes turn pitch black in a warning and he babbles something at me and then lets me go. I've never moved faster in my life, packing up my things and dashing out the door. I'll just look in on her and then go home, I say to myself, and my wolf says nothing, instead telling me to run. I remember the last place I'd seen her and make a run to her classroom, surprised to see a crowd of cheerleaders coming out of the room, smug looks on their faces. Almost as though they had done something. When they see me, they scatter, making me even more suspicious as I open the classroom door, blood draining out of my face as I see her. Winter had clearly been beaten, holding her ribs, and I watched how she trembled as she got to her feet. I should have moved quicker, and reacted, because before I could do anything she fell down again in front of me as I roared, "Somebody get a doctor here now," at the top of my alpha tone, sending students and teachers scurrying to do just that. I kneel in front of Winter and push back the hair covering her face, my heart breaking in two as I stare at the poor girl and her bruised face. She looks so childlike in that instance, so fragile, and I quietly pick her up and cradle her against my chest. Why, she barely weighs anything at all, I noticed absently as I maneuvered her carefully out of the classroom with me. A nurse comes running and stops as she stares at me and Winter. I growl at her and she blinks. "Follow me," she says, and I follow, my legs feeling like dead weights as we go into the nurse's room. "Put her on the bed," the nurse instructs, and I carefully place Winter down, gently, not wanting to hurt her. She still hasn't woken up. The nurse comes up beside me and gasps as she takes in Winter's condition. "What happened?" she exclaimed, and I give a helpless shrug. "I don't know," I said grimly, "but I intend to find out." The nurse hesitates. "I need to look her over," she says slowly, and I raise my eyebrows at her, refusing to move, and she sighs, unable to order an alpha away. I watch as the nurse slowly peels her shirt and jumper up, exposing her body. I could cry at the number of injuries and bruises on her body. The nurse blinks back a tear. "Those aren't all new," I growled, and the nurse nodded. "Some of these are older than others," she agrees, as though she's been beaten a few times. "The poor girl, I had no idea," she said, shaking her head. The nurse tenderly feels across her ribcage and I watch in shock as Winter's eyes suddenly open as she inhales in shock. "Ouch," she cries, and the nurse profusely apologizes. "I'm so sorry," she says, and Winter just nods, a tear trickling down her pale cheek. Without thinking, I wiped it away, trailing my finger down her cheek. Winter, I need to examine you. Can you tell me where it hurts? The nurse asks, and Winter points to her ribs, looking exhausted and going quiet. The nurse felt her ribs and I flinch as Winter cries out from the pain, feeling helpless, wishing like anything I can take her in my arms and comfort her, but knowing that I have no right to do so. Not after I'd rejected her. You have some broken ribs, the nurse says quietly. I think it's best you go to the hospital. I agree, am about to offer to take her, anything to help her in some small way when she shakes her head and bites her lip. I'll heal, she murmurs, and my mouth falls open. What kind of person refuses to go to a hospital? My wolf is becoming angry at her and so am I. You don't have a choice, I snap with all the anger in my voice I can muster and feel contempt at myself when she jumps startled, and winces. I didn't mean to make her do that. I don't have time, she argues, and I refuse to listen to her. Not good enough, I say and fold my arms, staring at her intently as she blushes and stares down at the ground. The nurse hesitated. Winter, sweetheart, you have a lot of older bruises on your body. Is someone hurting you? Something flashes across Winter's face so quickly that I almost miss it. No, she says hastily, and I know instinctively that she's lying. The nurse knows it too from the look on her face, but she decides not to push. That's all right, because I'll be pushing to know the truth once I've gotten this stubborn girl to the hospital. Hospital, I growled, and the nurse turned towards me. She'll need to lie down in the car and you'll have to drive slow or she could get hurt even more than she already is, she advises me, and I nod grimly. I glare at Winter. Stay here, I snap using my alpha tone. It's the only way I can guarantee she won't leave while I fetch my car. Without another word, I headed outside, rushing to my car. If I have to drag her inside the hospital, I will. Chapter 13. Winter POV. I sat in the bleak-looking hospital room, grateful that Jonathan had the common sense to leave me alone and sit in the hallway. I'm so angry at him for forcing me to come here when I don't want to go. I feel a sense of panic. What if they call my father and tell him I'm here? He'll kill me for sure. I try to hold my tears at bay as a young woman comes walking in, dressed in a doctor's coat. She looks concerned and I wonder if she's been told about my injuries already. I bet Jonathan told her. Winter, the woman says quietly, and I glance at her name tag. It reads Laura. She continues with a smile that I'm sure she means to be reassuring. I hear that you've been badly hurt. Can you show me where? I really need to get home, I said hastily. I was expected to be there ages ago. She frowns. I'm sure your family is worried about you. Would you like me to call them? I shook my head. No, it's fine. I don't want to bother them. She gives me a strange look, but there's no way I want them to contact my father or my brother. I shudder at the mere thought. It hurts here, I finally mumble as she looks at me, patiently waiting. I know she's not going to leave me alone until I show her, and so I reluctantly push up my shirt and jumper so she can look at my ribs. Laura gently prods my rib cage and I give a yelp, unable to help myself. Christ, that hurt! Now Laura is looking away and I fidget as I see her looking over at my old bruises. Well, she says finally, motioning for me to pull my top and jumper back down, which I do, feeling a lot less vulnerable now that my body is covered. Your ribs are broken. I can wrap them up for you until they heal properly, she offered. Give you some painkillers to help with the pain. Would you like that? I think about it. Having the painkillers doesn't seem like such a bad idea considering I was in a massive amount of pain. Maybe, if I rationed them, I could keep some for home when the pain from my beatings gets too bad. I'm also not going to complain if she wants to wrap a bandage around my stomach and rib cage to make me more comfortable. At this rate, I won't heal until late tomorrow and I want to be able to walk without feeling like I'm going to faint. I gave her a little nod and she began to rifle through her trolley. Lift your shirt back up, Laura orders me, and I do, wincing as she puts the bandage on tight, not enough to restrict my breathing, but firm enough that I felt myself beginning to relax as the pain diminished slightly. I'm hoping she'll just grab the painkillers and let me go, but instead, she sits down on the visitor chair and stares directly at me, making me feel extremely nervous. I know what she's about to ask and there's no way I'm going to tell her the truth. I value my life too much. Winter, I can tell that you have old bruises and new ones on top of them. Is there trouble at home? She asks delicately, and for a moment I hesitate. Yes, I want to scream. My own family beat me, starve me, and are cruel to me. Help me. But I don't. I can't, and my chest feels tight as I answer, lying completely to the kind woman I get bullied at school a lot. It's fine. It's not, but I put on a brave face and I can tell she's trying to tell if I'm telling the truth or lying. I fix my big blue eyes on her and it seemed to work. We can get the officers down here if you'd like to speak to them. Make a report about the people bullying you. She tries again and I feel bad for her. She's trying to help me and I'm shoving it back in her face. No thank you, I say firmly, and she bites her lip and sighs. It's up to you, she says sadly, and I nod, watching as she leaves, hopefully, to grab the painkillers she promised me. To my annoyance, he strides in, all confident and cocky-like. I curse myself for thinking he's handsome. The bastard rejected me, for heaven's sake. I shouldn't feel anything for him, but every time he comes near me, my heart flutters as though there's still part of the mate bond between us. I frown at him, but he doesn't seem to notice, or he doesn't care. I'll take you home, he tells me, and I gape at him. I can't have him do that. I can't have him near my house or my family. I can't let him know my shameful secret. It's none of his business. I don't even want to imagine the consequences of having a boy take me home and my father seeing it. Heck, Damian would punish me for it as well and make fun of me. I can't stand the thought and I feel my body starting to tremble. I really need those painkillers, I forced out, and, as I had hoped, he sprung around to go and fetch the nurse. I waited for a minute and sure enough, when I peered around the corner he was gone. I limp towards the hospital's exit, frantically dashing through, hoping that I'll make it to the main road before he finds me. I'd barely taken a step outside though when his voice boomed from behind me, stopping all the staff and patients in their tracks. Where are you going? You are hurt, injured, and trying to run. How can you be so stupid, he roars, and I flinch and turn around, eyeing him warily. Get back inside your room, he hisses, and I can't ignore him. What would be the point? He'd just use his alpha tone on me anyway, so it would just be a waste of time and energy. It doesn't stop me from stomping over to the bed though and plunking myself down, foolishly forgetting about my broken ribs. I flinch and swear as he glowers at me. Do I have to tie you to the bed, he grumbles, and even though I know it's wrong, my imagination goes into overdrive as I picture him doing just that, dressed in just his underwear, his bare chest. I blink and know that I'm blushing from the amused smirk on his arrogant face. Damn him, I think crossly and sulkily folded my arms over my own chest, saying nothing and looking away. Here are your painkillers, Laura announced from the doorway, handing over a small pill bottle, one every 4 to 6 hours as needed. You should be good as new by tomorrow night, she says, looking between the two of us warily. Did I interrupt something? She asks innocently. No, I mumbled, and Jonathan shook his head. Can she be discharged? He asks Laura and she nods, giving me one last searching look. Unless there's anything else you need or want to do, Winter, she says lightly, and I shrug. Thanks, but I'm all good, I tell her. Thanks for the painkillers. Chapter 14. Jonathan POV. I'm hurrying to the car, aware of Winter's condition. She might seem tough, but right now she looked like a strong wind would knock her over. The car is too far for her to walk to, and I get in and drive around to the front of the hospital, violently hoping she hasn't tried to leave on her own again. I can't believe she tried to do that. She's absolutely mad and the most stubborn girl I know, and I've only known her a few hours. To my relief, she's still where I left her, and I wait, the engine running, for her to come over and get in the passenger seat. I feel bad, but if I try and help she'll just refuse again. Once she's firmly buckled in, I started to slowly drive off, asking her for her address. She answers, but in a dull voice, as though frightened that I'm driving her home. I'm still suspicious of the bruises that litter her entire body, but I can't prove anything or help if she refuses to tell me. What do you do in your spare time? I ask awkwardly, and she shrugs. Great, she's going to be silent for the remainder of the trip. I tried again. So how do you like school? And sighed when she just shrugged and turned to look out the window. We get to her house and I make a move to help her out, but, stubborn wench that she is, she waves her arms at me and tells me to stop. I'm not used to this kind of treatment from another shifter, and my wolf is starting to get pissed off. Not because of her, but because she was refusing help. Even without the so-called mate bond, he remained concerned about Winter. Can you get to your house okay? I called out as she slammed the door closed. I close my eyes and try hard to keep patient. I'll be fine, she says testily, and I pull out, looking in the rearview mirror as she begins to shuffle away. I don't trust her. There was something about the way she said it, and the way she hesitated before giving me her address, that niggled at me. Instead of leaving, I traveled around the block and parked on a side street, cautiously making my way to a tree where I could see what she did clearly. Without being so close she would be able to sense me. As I thought, she shuffled right past the house she'd told me she lived in and hobbled further up the street to one of the most run-down and shabby-looking houses I'd ever seen. The grass is completely dead out the front, and the mailbox looks as though it's been run over several times, completely on a lean. The front door's paint is peeling, and there are empty beer bottles near the front door which she uses her foot to nudge away. I watch closely as she places a key in the lock. There's no emotion on her face, almost as though she's detached, but that could be due to her pain maybe? She's clearly poor, I think to myself. Maybe that's why she didn't want me to drop her off. It made sense, but something still rankled. Why would she not at least tell the nurse about her old bruises? I don't believe for a second that it's due to bullies at school. There are far too many of them. As it was, I will be having a firm talk with the principal tomorrow about his failure to protect one of his students from a vicious and violent attack. The fact they were girls didn't matter to me. They deserved to be punished, and as much as my wolf would have loved to get his hands on all of them, I had to let the school handle this. Winter walks into the house and I hear a small thump as the front door closes and the click of a lock. Then nothing but silence. I wait, for what I don't know, eventually giving up. She was fine, probably doing homework. My wolf is still uneasy, but I can't hang around forever. I make a note to swing past again tomorrow afternoon without telling her, if only to ease my own curiosity. Part of me wonders what her bedroom looks like, whether she has personal items in it or if it was as bare as the rooms in the house. I could see the living room from here, and it contained one couch and an old TV on a crate, for heaven's sake. Where were her parents? I could have sworn that someone had mentioned a brother as well, but Winter hadn't said one word about him. I place my hands into my pant pockets and begin to saunter back towards my car, deep in thought. My mate, or the girl who would have been my mate, was in danger, and although I had rejected her, I couldn't bring myself to abandon her. Not now. I glanced back at the house and shivered. It seemed cold somehow, completely lacking in everything that makes a house a home. I get into the driver's seat and slowly pull out, careful to watch for oncoming traffic as I make my way back to the pack house. I suspect my mother is going to interrogate me the instant I get home, most probably worried out of her mind because I'm back late. I sigh. She's so overprotective of me, like all mothers are. So why wasn't Winter's? Surely no mother would fail to see the bruises on their daughter's body? Did she have a mother? Now that I thought about it, Winter had muttered something about a father but not anything about a mother. I groan. Stop thinking about her already, I scold myself, and my wolf just sniggers at me. Shut it, I tell him fiercely, but he just grins even more. You didn't completely sever the mate bond. Strange. It only happens when you are not 100% sure you want to reject someone. I guess you had some doubts, huh, Jonathan, he told me smugly, and I scowled. Had I had the tiniest bit of doubt in my mind when I rejected her? Was there still a mate bond drawing me to Winter? Was my wolf telling the truth? There was no reason for him to lie though, and I pondered what to do now. I can't bring myself to reject her a second time, not when I was already thinking constantly about her. Besides, how do you tell someone your heart wasn't fully in the rejection without giving them some sort of sense of false hope? I will deal with it later. I pulled up at the pack house and looked into the angry, blazing eyes of my mother. I flinch. She looks pissed. Chapter 15. Damian POV. I'm hanging around behind the school building, waiting for my mates and subtly smoking when I hear the snooty cheerleaders coming past. Christ, I can't stand shallow, vain creatures. For some reason, Jessica keeps trying to search me out, and I know it's because she likes me. A shame, because I really dislike her. I press my back against the brick wall and pray I'm not seen as they walk past. I gave that what for, Jessica says, flipping her long hair and inspecting her fingernails. We sure did, another girl laughs, and I wonder which girl they are talking about. Jessica had so many enemies it was hard to keep track of them. Did you see how she couldn't even get up? Jessica sneers, and the girls all laugh out loud as I roll my eyes. Clearly, they'd beaten up some poor girl in a pack. It was pure cowardice to gang up on a single person, but then, since when was Jessica fair in anything she did? She deserved it. That alpha Jonathan is going to be mine, and she needs to learn her place, Jessica huffs. So this was, over the alpha, now attending our school. Why am I not surprised Jessica now has him in her sights? She certainly got around, that was for sure. I heard he rejected her. Of course he did. An alpha is never going to be with a lowly shifter such as her. It's just my luck that they stopped right in front of me, gossiping in their group, their backs turned to me. I silently swear. If I move I'll be noticed. I'm stuck where I am until they choose to leave, which, judging by the way they were talking to each other, wasn't likely to be anytime soon. I sigh. They are still talking in those loud, high-pitched, annoying voices that I swear every damn cheerleader in the school possesses. She's so disgusting. She's pathetic. She didn't even try to fight back. That's because she's weak. An alpha needs a strong Luna by their side, like me, Jessica declares, and I almost scoff as the other girls begin to agree. Spineless cowards, every single one of them. Do you think we'll be punished? As if she's going to tell. How many times have we hurt her and she's said nothing, just stood there and taken it? Besides, the principal is a friend of my parents, there's no way he would dare try and do anything. Now I'm beginning to become suspicious, pressing myself against the wall and venturing slightly closer in order to hear their whispers. I wonder if she's still in the classroom. Do you think we should go back? Jessica looked incredulous. I'm not going back to check. Someone will find her eventually, she said dismissively, and her friends fell silent. Winter will be fine, Jessica says, beginning to walk to the car as her little clique group follows, waving goodbyes and blowing kisses to each other. It's nauseating. She'd said Winter was beaten up. I hesitated, but this time I couldn't help myself and began to turn toward the classrooms. One of my friends runs up. Just so you know, Winter was taken to the nurse's office, he says with a sly grin, thinking that I won't care as usual. He's in for a shock because I instantly take off on a run, heading straight to where Winter had been taken, crashing through the door and effectively startling the nurse. Where is she? I growled, my hands clenching into fists. The nurse fairly gapes at me as my eyes sweep around the room, narrowing in on the bed which was empty. Surely Winter hadn't walked home? Not in her condition. Are you talking about Winter? She says timidly, and I give a short nod, impatiently waiting for her to tell me where my little sister has gone. She's gone to the hospital, she offers before her own eyes narrow on me, her arms folded. I flinch from the look on her face. Your sister, she said pointedly, glaring at me, was badly beaten and needs to be checked out. Not only that she snaps, but she has old bruises on her body. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? She growls, and I feel a sense of remorse and regret. I have no doubt that a lot of the bruises were ones inflicted by me. The nurse knows it too, for she looks at me with nothing but contempt in her eyes. I said nothing. After all, she's right, I have hurt my little sister, and for what? The approval of a drunken father who never even knew we existed half the time? God, I feel sick to my stomach. What have I done? Why had I let father mold me into a monster? I'd failed Winter, and my poor mother would be devastated if she'd seen the way I treated my little sister. I said nothing, however, and hurried out to my car. I get to the hospital, but Winter is gone, apparently having gone home with the alpha of all people. I'm angry that he's been by her side this entire time when I know that it should have been me helping her. Her big brother should be the one looking out for her, and even though I know it's irrational, part of me is going into overprotective mode. I slammed my hands down on the steering wheel in frustration. Winter had to be at home, and I started the car, slowly peeling out of the parking lot, my thoughts coming in droves. How did I convince Winter that I would change? She only had my past actions to go on, and I knew that it was going to take a massive effort on my part to show her that I could be the big brother she'd always wanted, could be relied on to be there for her. I would have to beg and work for forgiveness from her, but that seemed only right. God, what had I done? I could blame my father, but I was also equally to blame for my own actions. I should have stopped listening to him by now, started thinking for myself, and refused to do what he wanted. I would never make that mistake again, I decided, just as I pulled my car into the driveway. Chapter 16. Winter POV. I'm dreading going into the house after being so late. My father is going to be pissed that dinner's not on the table, but to my shock, the house is pitch black, with no lights in the house on at all. Even my brother appears to be missing. I almost shouted out hallelujah in my excitement, shuffling along in pain until I reached the kitchen. There are signs father has been home most of the day. Tons of beer bottles, most empty, sat on the old, faded, wooden dining table. I sigh. If he's gone out, it's most likely he's gone to the pub. This means he won't be home until late, with luck, well after I've gone to bed. It's almost as if the moon goddess decided to give me a helping hand, and I can't help but begin to hum under my breath despite everything. Then I hear it. The smallest sound but loud enough to cause me to freeze in terror, the creak of the front door as it opens, and I turn in hesitation, praying it's not my father. I hadn't had enough time to start dinner yet, and I could feel my body beginning to tremble, my hands shaking as I stood and waited to see who it was. Winter, I heard my brothers shout, and my heart began to beat at a normal pace again. I could handle Damian, but I wondered what he wanted and why he wasn't out smoking weed with his friends. Where are you? He growls. In the kitchen, I squeaked, feeling timid like a small mouse must feel. I heard his footsteps approaching, loud on the wooden floors of the living room. He almost barrels inside and then stops, folding his arms and glaring at me. I'm a bit confused. Had I done something to upset him? Or was he just finding any excuse to wind me up? You, he snaps, waving his arms around. Why didn't you tell me or ring me? I blink. Tell him what? I'm completely puzzled. Instead, he says heatedly, I overhear that Jessica bitch bragging about how she's beaten up my little sister and her cheerleader friends helped her. I say nothing, I'm absolutely speechless and confused about why he's angry with me. Since when did he give a damn about me or what I went through every day? I feel nothing but emptiness inside of me and rising anger. How bad is it? He says tightly, and I still bite my lip and look away from him. As if I'm going to answer him. He's impatient though, and before I can stop him, he's lifting up my jumper and shirt while I struggle helplessly. There's nothing I can do, he's much stronger than me, and I see his eyes widen as he takes in the bandage as well as the yellowing of old bruises all over my ribcage and stomach. I blush as I realize how far he's pulled them up and quickly tug them down as his eyes turn black. I can't take it anymore. Why do you care? I spit out, folding my arms and trying not to wince at the pain. Since when did you ever give a damn about me, your little sister? You've made my life a living, Damian, you have no right to pretend to care now. I'm almost shouting, by now, and my brother, to give him credit, doesn't interrupt me. Instead, he waits until I'm done before speaking, in a gentle voice instead of an angry one, his hands held out as though begging for forgiveness. Winter, he says, almost pleading with me as I raise my eyebrows. I know what I've done to you is wrong, and believe me, it's been bad. I have always hated you for killing our mother. He trails off and I interrupt him. I didn't kill our mother, I almost screamed furiously, tears flowing down my cheeks as I began to sob. It's always the same thing with him and my father, blaming me for something that was completely out of my control. I know, he shouts back, frustrated, and I gape at him. Had he just said that? After all these years, was he finally waking up to the fact that I'd just been an innocent child who couldn't do anything to help my mother? I'm suspicious. I've spent years listening to Father ramble on about it being your fault, he snaps, running a hand through his hair impatiently, and because I was young, and I was angry, I believed him when he turned on you. So help me God, I let that bastard lie to me and manipulate me. There's no excuse for what I've done to you, Winter. I know that, and I don't expect you to forgive me instantly, he says irritably, but at least hear me out. Oh, I'm hearing him all right, but I'm not about to let my guard down. I've done it too many times before and been disappointed, but some part of me, a very small part, wants to believe him. I desperately want my big brother to actually tell the truth. I've been thinking a lot lately, he exhales and glances at me, looking very guilty, and I can't stand to hurt you anymore. If Mum was still alive, she'd kick my ass for what Father and I have been doing to you. She'd kill me and I'd deserve it. I've failed her by failing you, he said urgently, and I felt my heart skip a beat. He seemed so genuine, so sincere that a tiny spark of hope lit up inside of me. I'm not going to expect you to believe me, but I'm going to show you just how much I can change, he continues. I want to be a big brother and not a coward who listens to his father instead of thinking for himself. I'm starting to wonder if he smoked some weed and mixed it with drugs. This wasn't anything I would ever have expected in a million years of my brother. It seemed too good to be true. I heaved a big sigh. Actions meant more than words, and I decided I would wait and see what he'd do next. We both stiffen as the front door opens and I can't help myself, my body shaking instinctively as I smell the disgusting odor of our father as he approaches the kitchen, stumbling along, well and truly inebriated. To my astonishment, Damian pushes me behind him and faces my father, who merely shoots him with a glance. Out of my way, boy, he snaps, I want another beer, he slurs, and Damian seems to tense. I'm praying that there isn't going to be a fight. Then Father starts to stumble and Damian reluctantly catches him as he falls unconscious in his arms, giving me a disgusted look. Drunk as a skunk like usual, he complains, picking him up and placing him on the couch while I watch. Hope he has one of a hangover when he wakes up, he curses. He looks around the kitchen just as his stomach growls. I wait for him to demand dinner, but instead, he surprises me once again. How about I order us both a pizza for dinner? My treat. Chapter 17. Winter POV. I started the next morning with a big smile on my face. Last night had been so much fun, laughing and joking with my brother, actually reminiscing about Mum without him getting angry at me. I get dressed and rush downstairs, stopping in my tracks as I spot my father waiting for me. I glance upwards hoping to see Damian, but there's no sign of him and I hesitate, wondering if I should call out for help. But it was also possible that Damian had left for school already, in which case, I was on my own anyway. My father's beady little eyes rest on me and I flinch, smelling his breath and the beer from there. It's repulsive, almost as though he's bathed in it. I stop on the steps, too frightened to make a move, but to my surprise, my father gives me a smile that instantly makes me suspicious. Why was he suddenly in a good mood? Had he maybe gotten another job already? Normally it took him weeks though. Even then, he never smiled at me. My stomach churns with dread. Winter, my father says heartily, and I eye him suspiciously. Yes, I said quietly, my feet still firmly rooted to the ground, my body beginning to tremble in fear. Something was up. He was acting too strangely for my liking. You look pale, he says, and I place a hand on my cheek. It's true that I'm pale, but then, other than walking to school and back, I don't really see much sunlight. So being pale was normal for me, not that he'd notice, of course. Or it could be because it felt like all the blood had drained out of my face the second I saw he was home. He comes closer and I instinctively flinch, raising my arm as though to shield off a hit that I suspect was coming. Instead, nothing happens and I place my arm back down, to see a wounded expression on my father's face. I wasn't going to hurt you, he says quietly, and I want so badly to believe him, but nothing on this god-green earth would ever get me to believe my father. Instead, all I can wonder is what he wants. He's never acted this civil to me ever and, if anything, I'm even warier of him than before. Come down already, he says slightly irritably and I exhale, cautiously moving one foot in front of the other, reluctantly making my way down to the foot of the stairs, my heart thudding loudly and quickly in my chest. I wish Damian had been here, at least then he'd probably fill me in on what was happening. Kitchen, my father said and I almost gagged as I smelled his breath, saying nothing and walking into the kitchen. I assume that he wants me to prepare breakfast, but to my surprise, he places his hands on my shoulders and forces me to sit at the dining table. I'll make us some toast, he says jovially. Coffee? He asks, and I'm stunned. Had father had a change of mind and decided he was going to stop abusing me? What had brought this on? Was I dreaming? Yes please, I mumble and he nods, brusquely making one up as I stare down at the table. I feel uncomfortable, awkward even. This is the most I've ever spoken to him in who knows how long and I'm not quite sure what to say. When he places the toast and coffee in front of me, I inhale deeply, appreciating the strong aroma, giving father a tentative smile as he joins me. Thank you, I whisper and he nods, biting into his toast. I take a small nibble of mine, feeling emotional. He'd put peanut butter on it but he'd cut it into triangles, the way I'd like to eat it when mother was still alive. So I was thinking, he says gruffly, staring at his coffee, that maybe today it would be a good idea if you stayed home. You look sickly anyway, he adds. I'm confused. I've never missed a day of school in my life. Not only that, but I felt fine, I wasn't sick at all. I shake my head. I can't miss school, I protested thickly, taking a sip of my coffee. I can't afford to miss any classes, I added tensely, waiting for him to explode. Instead, he just regards me calmly, still drinking, and I pick up my own cup and continue to sip while I wait. I blink. Was it my imagination or was father looking slightly fuzzy? I shake my head, putting it down to tiredness, my body feeling relaxed. My father looks calm. I'm afraid the school isn't expecting you, he tells me firmly, shaking his own head. I've already called to advise them you're sick and won't be in for the rest of the week, he adds. I'm shocked. Why would you do that? I say slowly, my mouth beginning to feel dry. Well, you're needed elsewhere, he says quietly, and my jaw drops open. I make an attempt to stand but it's like my limbs refuse to cooperate with me and I stare at my father, realizing that he's laced my drink with some sort of drug. It's the only explanation I can think of as the room starts to spin around me. Why, I managed to utter as he came over to me, my body sliding out of the chair onto the ground. I blinked tears from my eyes. How stupid of me to even trust my father for a moment. I should have instantly known something was up. But why had he drugged me? You see, my father says, coming into view, a large grin on his fat, puffy, face. I'm in desperate need of money and last night I was given an offer I just couldn't pass up. What I mumble, trying to scrabble at the tiles, and get a grip on anything that might make my body move. I pray for Damian to magically come home, but it's futile. I scream as I feel his foot on my back, squishing me and making it impossible to attempt to move. Well, it came to me that you're a very pretty girl, my father says, and I feel my heart skip a beat. Surely he's not about to? Not to his own daughter. You can make me a lot of money, he says gruffly, and I owe someone money, so it's a win-win for me. He chuckles and I open my mouth but nothing comes out, my voice merely a croak. I feel defeated. There's no getting out of this situation and all I can do is lie there completely helpless, my whole body paralyzed and my vision slowly beginning to diminish as blackness began to creep in. I suppose it's only fair to tell you where you are going, Winter, he chuckled, and I felt nothing but hatred towards him. If I could have killed him right then and there, I would have. As it was, I wished I could kick him in the nuts. He leans down and bends close to my ears, his stubble tickling my face as I feel the bile rise up in my throat, dreading what he's about to say or tell me. I've sold you, he growls, satisfaction in his voice, to someone who wants to have a lot of fun with you, and when he's done he threatens, then I'll sell you gain. You are useless, worthless, the only thing you're good for is being a whore and now I've made you one. I wish I could scream, yell, anything, but as he moves off of me, the darkness creeps in and I lose whatever hold I have on keeping myself awake, my eyes closing against my will, my breathing beginning to even out, and to my horror, there's now only darkness as I fall unconscious right there on the kitchen floor. Chapter 18. Winter POV. It's just a dream, it's just a dream, I chanted to myself in my head, forcing my eyes, which feel really gritty, open, only to see nothing more than darkness surrounding me. Wherever I am, there's not much light to see. My head is throbbing and I wince as I try to move my arms and legs to no avail. Something was chafing and I looked down to see that I was firmly tied to a chair, my legs tied to the legs and my arms behind me. I swear, but it's muffled by the gag that's been shoved in my mouth and tied around my head. MMMF, I cry out, but there's no answer and my eyes scan whatever this room is for any sign of escape. It appears to be a basement of some sort, the floor a hard concrete, various pieces of furniture in states of decay. The air smells disgusting and moldy and I try not to inhale too much. There's nothing that I can use to free myself and I feel sick to my stomach. Even on the saddest of days, I had never once thought my father was capable of selling me to someone for money. I thought maybe, in the smallest bit of his heart, he might have actually given some sort of damn about me. How naive was I? He'd never forgiven me for Mother's death, and if he wanted to destroy any love I might have had for him, this was the way to do it. I shove frantically at the chair, scraping it across the floor, and curse at the noise it makes. Maybe there's something in one of the drawers of the various furniture that might have something useful. But as I'm moving, something catches the corner of my eye and I whip my head around and begin to feel a rising sense of panic. There's a bed in the room, something that might be unremarkable considering all of the other bits of furniture in the basement, but it's almost new, and it's made up. Why would a bed be made up in the basement? There was only one answer that came to mind and it wasn't a good one. I need to get out of here and God, I need to do it quickly. There was no telling when whoever had bought me would come back. I scrape the chair as I sort of drag it with my body, careful not to tip over and fall. It makes a racket, but I'm past the point of caring. My only focus is getting out of here before it's too late. I can't count on anyone to save me. The desk I make it to is empty, or at least it feels like that. It's kinda difficult to see properly and feel with hands that don't have much give. I wonder about using the corner of the desk to rub the ropes against, but it would take forever, and even attempting to undo the knots isn't working. I try to scream for help, but the gag just muffles everything I try and my lungs get full of dust, which makes me heave and cough. I'm terrified. I'm all alone and I don't know if I'm even in the same town, let alone if I'm close to the pack house. I don't even know how long I've been out for. What if I was taken to a different town? Would my brother Damian come looking for me, or would father lie to him? Probably the latter. I feel tears well up in my eyes and I break down crying, sniveling as I wait for the inevitable. I know what the person who bought E plans to do to me, and it's the last way I imagined losing my innocence. Bile rises in my throat. Finally, there was only one other thing I could think of, and with my eyes scrunched closed so I couldn't talk my way out of it, I tipped myself sideways and let the chair fall, hoping that it might make it easier to get out of my restraints. Success! The ropes seem to be slightly looser and I wiggle and pull and tug as hard as I can to try to undo the knots. I feel the tiniest bit of hope as they begin to get slack. Way to go, Winter, I cheer myself on, ignoring the chafing on my wrists and the feeling of my skin peeling off as I tug at the ropes. I can deal with the pain later. Right now I was focused on getting these damn ropes off and then untying my legs. I groan as the ropes come off and wriggle my wrists around as the blood begins to circulate again. God, it hurts, it's excruciating as the numbness fades and the pain begins. I reach around, my shoulders protesting, and begin to untie my ankles, which are just as tight and just as annoying to get undone. Sitting doesn't make it easier, and I'm forced to stay lying down as I tug and pull, swearing to myself. I take the gag off and am about to call out for help when I stop. If I called out, whoever he was, would hear me. For all I knew, he was upstairs waiting for me to wake up. So I keep silent and the ropes begin to slacken and then finally pull off, leaving me free to get to my feet, which are full of pins and needles. I can't believe I've done it. I searched the room for any windows or doors besides the exit and found none. There's only one way out of this room, and that's to go up. A weapon would be useful, but I'm not about to waste time searching. I start to climb the stairs, clutching the banister for support as I make my way up, placing my feet as lightly as possible and praying they don't creak. The door is unlocked and after debating with myself, I slowly turn the handle and poke my head out. There's no one waiting on the other side and I begin to creep out, closing the door gently behind me. I'm in some sort of mansion, the rooms are huge and I can see the front door, my excitement rising. In fact, I'm so damn excited that I threw away any sense of caution in my mad dash to get to the door. However, before I can put my hand on the doorknob, I hear a strange clicking sound behind me, one that makes my whole body go tense and still. I would know that noise anywhere. It was the clicking sound of a gun and I had no doubt it was aimed at me. I stopped instantly, letting my hand drop down to my side. Turn around, the voice growls and I frown. It sounds oddly familiar to me, as though I know the person it belongs to. I turn, slowly, petrified of who I'm going to come face to face with, and when I do, it's all I can do not to scream, astonished at the person who would be my ruination. Chapter 19. Winter POV Thomas, I breathed, staring at him incredulously, unable to believe my own eyes. I knew this boy and had met him on more than several occasions. He was one of my brother's best friends and also took pervading pleasure in humiliating and tormenting me. Don't tell me he's the one who bought me. Not one of my brother's friends. Surely he wouldn't betray my brother, or did he think by doing this he was helping him in some sick way to take revenge on me? My eyes never leave the gun that's being held firmly in his hand, pointed directly at my head. One wrong move and I was frightened he'd shoot my head off. He laughs. Oh, Winter, you should see your face, he scoffs, looking highly amused. It's just a prank then? You'll let me go, I said hopefully, and he shook his head, his eyes turning pitch black for a moment. No, he says adamantly, and I shrink back at the vehemence in his voice. You see, I've always liked you, Winter. I know I tease you and hurt you, but that's so that your brother keeps inviting me around to be close to you. I feel nauseous. He could care less about my brother, he was only friends with him to get to me. Imagine my surprise, he continues, his eyes narrowing on me, when I heard your father offering your services for a night of ahem, he coughs pleasure with a virgin, he says, and I feel myself turning bright red with embarrassment. Well, you wouldn't believe how many people were interested, he tells me disgustedly, and I wanted to scream at him that he was just as repulsive. If he didn't have the gun trained on me, I would have. Instead, I had to bite my lip and keep my silence. In the end, it was down to the highest bidder, which happened to be me. Isn't it great my parents are rich, he says gleefully, and I say nothing, feeling numb, as though I'm not even in my body right now but floating and looking down. Look at it this way, Winter, he said urgently, at least I'll be gentle, not like the other men who would have bought you. Isn't that better? I tremble. No, it's not better because I want to hold onto my virginity for my future mate and husband. But what do you say to a psychopath with a gun? I wanted to live, not die right now. He waves the gun and I flinch. Walk towards me, he orders, and trembling, I walk on unsteady feet towards him, his hand coming out and gripping the back of my shirt as he shoves me in front of him. I don't know how you got out of your restraints, he mutters as he pushes me towards the basement, but I guess it doesn't really matter right now, does it? I can feel his breath on my neck, his hand squeezing my shirt, and the hard barrel of the gun against my back. I was trembling, terrified, and wanting so badly to run that it took all my courage to go back into the room I'd escaped from. I take the stairs as slowly as I can and he keeps his grip on me. I contemplated taking him by surprise, but he's got the gun too close to me, so it's too much of a risk. See that bed, he growls, and I go completely cold. Go and sit on it. I want to scream, to cry, beg him not to do this, but my voice fails me and I follow his instructions, sitting on the bed with tears flowing down my cheeks. Don't cry, Winter, he murmurs, and I stay still as he wipes the tears away with one hand. What did he expect me to do, jump for joy? Don't move or I swear I'll shoot you in the leg and then have fun, he snaps, and I give a hasty nod, staring at the ground as he disappears. I could run for it, but his threat was genuine and, quite frankly, being shot wasn't something I wanted to have to deal with on top of what he was about to do. He almost dances down the stairs, clutching something tightly in his hands. I eye it curiously and catch it as he throws it at me. I want you to put it on, he says gruffly, and my heart sinks as I unroll the fabric. It's so sheer it's see-through, a white baby doll with matching panties. I swallow hard. It looks like something someone would wear on their wedding night, and I can see how lustful his gaze is as he motions for me to do what he said. Turn your back, I pleaded, but he shook his head, looking stony. No chance, he scoffs, raising the gun again. Please. Get dressed, he roars, and I flinch, hurriedly standing up and, with shaking hands, take off my clothes until I'm completely naked in front of him. Good girl, he whispers, and I say nothing, fumbling around with the baby doll while he just stands there. I saw him out of the corner of my eye and I swear I wanted to vomit right then and there. He's stroking himself while he's watching me, his pants unzipped, his penis fully out. He never takes his eyes off me. I finally get the blasted baby doll on and the panties, and he tells me to lie down, something I'm extremely reluctant to do. He cocks the gun and I crawl onto the bed, lying down with my face upwards, sobbing wildly as I feel his hand begin to stroke my leg. His touch is repulsive, his hand clammy, and it's all I can do not to drive my leg upwards. Relax, Winter, he tried to tell me, as though trying to soothe me, I'll make it good for you, I promise. Thomas, if you care about me at all, you won't do this, I pleaded, and for a moment something flashed across his eyes and just as quickly it was gone. You're mine, Winter, no one else, and after this, no one will ever want you as their mate, he growls, and I wonder if he actually believes that. Because if a mate loves you, it won't matter about your past and what happened. But maybe he didn't think of it like that or in that way. Because there was no way I'd stay with him just because he was taking what wasn't his, to begin with. He could go. I'm going to put the gun down, he tells me, and I start to relax, thinking that maybe I can take advantage of that, but something makes him pause for a moment and I see remorse in his eyes. I don't trust you, he whispers, and before I can stop him, he puts the gun to my foot and pulls the trigger as I scream. Chapter 20. Winter POV. I've never felt such pain as when the bullet pierced my skin. I heard a clang and knew it had gone all the way through, but my God, the blood, my stomach churning, my screams all pierced the room and I saw Thomas's face change. Why was he looking so pale when the bastard had just shot me? Shhh Winter, he soothes, racing off and fetching a towel while I continue to shriek at the top of my lungs. When he came back, he wrapped it and looked at me, contrite. I wanted to make sure you couldn't run off, he whispered, and I glared at him. Well, you succeeded, I screamed, my voice hoarse. It hurts, I sobbed. Yes, I know I sounded like a coward, but you try getting shot and see how pleasant it feels. I get some satisfaction that there are blood droplets on the damn baby doll. There, he says soothingly, and I can't help but notice he's put the gun down as he comes over and sits beside me, wiping my tears away with his thumb. I swallow, my eyes beseeching him to stop, in so much pain I'm trying not to vomit, even as I miserably notice that the blood has started to stop trickling. Every single movement of my foot or leg brings utter agony and there's no way I'm making it off this bed anytime soon. All better, he says, and I scowl at him. Is he serious? Does he think just because I have shifter blood, that the injury, bloody, heals in minutes? No, I shriek, not all better, you bastard, I scream, and before I can so much as blink, his arm swings back and hits me directly in the face as I cower underneath him. Enough, he growls, and I stiffen, forcing myself to hold back more screams, barely able to see through my eyes, they were filled with tears. I saw him bend down and then I felt bile rise up in my throat as he kissed me, his lips harsh against mine, one of his hands twining around to the back of my head and in my hair as he pushed against me. I struggle, but am no match, not with how weak I feel, and as he demands access with his tongue, I'm forced to open my mouth to him. His tongue touches mine and it's all I can do not to gag, it's that slimy feeling, and I'm getting no pleasure from the way it seems like he's licking my own. I heave a big sigh of relief when he finally pulls away and begin to breathe fresh air into my lungs. You taste so sweet, Thomas whispers, and I shudder, watching as he begins to undress himself, my eyes looking away as he slowly peels his shirt off, kicking his unzipped pants and underwear down onto the floor. I don't want to see it, but it's like my eyes have a mind of their own and I gulp as I see his erection. He's big, wide, and I can't envision anything like that fitting inside of me, not without me screaming underneath him. Please, I whispered, feeling numb inside. I know he's not going to stop, not when he's gone this far. He smirks at me as he slowly climbs onto the bed, my foot still uselessly lying still. Don't worry, he whispers into my ear as I stare dully at the ceiling. I promise to make it good for you, remember? It's your first time and I want you to remember it forever, he finished, and I wanted to laugh, feeling hysterical. Oh, I would remember this forever, but not in the way that he meant. His fingers creep under my baby doll and I tense, feeling his hands against my breasts, squeezing them roughly. I cried out and he kissed me, stopping me from crying out anymore, and then he moved, kissing the nape of my neck, one hand effectively strangling me as he did. I want more than anything to pretend I'm somewhere else, that this isn't happening to me and that this is all a dream, but in reality, it's a nightmare come to life. His fingers move down to my panties and I gulp, feeling his hands roughly grip them, pulling them down my legs. He gets gentler as he remembers the pain in my foot and gently slides them off, a broad smile on his face. You're so lovely, Winter, so beautiful, he says, his eyes glazed, and I wonder if he's pretending that this is somewhere else, that I'm not screaming in his fantasy, because that's what it was to him, pure fantasy. No way in had I ever shown an ounce of liking for Thomas, and for him to be like this wasn't something I had ever thought would happen. I need to do something because he's already licking his lips and staring down at my pussy. I force myself to grab his arm, my eyes looking directly into his. Thomas, I moan, feeling disgusted. In myself, I want you so badly. I lay it on thick and it works because he starts to stroke himself, making his cock even more engorged as I try not to stare down at it. Give me a moment, he grunts, and I shake my head slowly at him, watching as he looks at me confused. We need protection, I panted out. I don't want to get pregnant, and I don't think you're ready to be a father yet, are you? I clung to hope. Please say you don't want to, please say you don't want to, I chant in my mind. He cocks his head to the side, a thoughtful expression on his face. If I get pregnant we won't be able to do this again, I say weakly, and he narrows his eyes. I hope this is enough to persuade him. I have a condom in my wallet, he mutters and reluctantly peels himself off me, giving me a small smile. He really is just gullible. Either way, I don't care if it works to my advantage. Don't move, he warns, and then glances over at my foot with a sigh. Not that I think you can, he adds, and I give a small nod. He hesitates and then slowly moves towards the staircase, backing up with his eyes fixed on mine. I try to keep myself looking innocent, my breathing shallow, watching as he gets closer to the doorway. I know his wallet's in a bowl by the front door and that he can be there and back within mere minutes, but it might just be enough, that is so long as he doesn't remember. The door opens and for a moment he stands there as though debating and then rushes out. I wasted no time, hopping onto both legs and swearing profusely under my breath as pain ricocheted through my leg, stumbling towards the place he'd left the gun. He had completely forgotten he'd put it down, or he'd underestimated my ability to move. I'd sooner cut my leg off than let the son of a touch me anymore, and my hand closes around the handle as I check the safety. Now I hold the key to getting out of here firmly in my hands, and there is no doubt in my mind that I'm about to use it. The rest of the audiobook will be continued in the next episode. Join us on Patreon for early access or more great audiobooks. A link is provided in the video description.